beautiful people, my vloggies. This is the vlogging grandmother. My name is Patti Boulaye, and this is a series in which I am telling you about my life called Let My Life Speak For Me. I mentioned last time that I was an eavesdropper. Yes, I loved eavesdropping. You see, my mother was a dressmaker, and when these women would gather around because she's made their wedding dresses or they come for fitting, they would all sit around my mother's kind of like work room, and they would start talking about things like that 7-year-old wouldn't know about. But I loved eavesdropping. And I would want to run errands. You know, I'd come into the room. Would you like a drink? Would you like this? Would you like that? And of course, when they caught on to the fact that I'm always eavesdropping, they would say things like, little pigs have big ears. And I didn't know they were talking about me. Anyway, as it happened, I learned so much from these women about life, especially about courtship, which was interesting for a child to learn. You see, my mother was, even though she was very young, but of course she'd given birth to 9 children by this point, everyone just expected her to be older than she was. And she did look very young. It's not as if she looked that age, but she had such wisdom, incredible wisdom. I always prayed that I had that wisdom. But the women would come and talk about husbands, wives, marriages. There was one woman in particular. Apparently, I gathered she was quite tiny woman, and her husband was quite big, but he was a drunk. And they had a little child. And he would get drunk and come back and beat her up. And they would talk about this every time they gathered. It was about this poor woman. You know, and everyone would go, oh, how is she faring? And then the stories would start. And I kept thinking, why doesn't she just take the baby and run away? But anyway, one day, the story changed. One of the women said, would you believe it? She beat her husband up and threw him out. And I thought, how can she? She's a tiny woman, this big man. And of course, the other women said the same. They go, what? I said, yes. She beat it. Yeah, come. I said, well, the problem was he would come home and attack her. You see, they lived in a compound. I don't know, a compound is sort of like, you know, like the ancient Romans lived in compounds. Well, in Nigeria, you would live maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 families in one compound. And so your business was everybody else's business. Everybody knew what was going on. Apparently, her husband came home and he beat her. I mean, she took it as usual. But this time, he hit the baby. He hit her child. She got up and she kicked him where it counts, beat him while he was on the floor, threw him out, threw all his things out. All the neighbors gathered. It was embarrassing. Even though he was drunk, it was embarrassing. So I gathered he never came back. And one of the women said, how could she have beaten? I mean, come on, she's half the size of the man. Somebody said, well, you see, when God created man and woman, he gave men the strength because they have to go hunting. They have to take all the, physical chances and face physical dangers. But he gave the woman common sense. I thought that was interesting because she had to bring up the children. She had to be ahead spiritually, mentally, in every way, ahead of things for the safety of the child. And then she said something that puzzled me for a long time. She said, but then God gave man a weak point so the woman would be able to control him if she needed to. And it killed me. I couldn't find out what this weak point was. Well, I did years later, a few years later. I'll tell you about that in another story. But anyway, at the same time, there would be among these women one that would have a daughter who was getting married that she was not sure of, and some would have a son. Okay, I remember once this young man came and brought a young lady with him, and he said that his parents were not keen on their relationship. And we're not keen because of the family she came from. Anyway, I don't know the ins and outs. It was just one of those stories. He wanted Mommy's help. And so Mommy interviewed this young woman, and it turns out she was actually an only child, which is unusual in Nigeria. You know, it's very unusual because most people have large families, cousins and everything like that. And so he came from a large family. She didn't know how to deal with his mother, according to tradition. You know, respect. Older people expect great respect in our tradition. After this, Mommy interviewed this girl. I was surprised to see her back the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. She literally in the end became part of the household. It was amazing. Such wisdom. She had actually come to see how a large family works. She would listen, she would learn, she would volunteer. If you wanted to do something, she would ask you if she could do it for you. My goodness. And I suddenly thought, wow. Okay, at one point, we were little children. We're thinking, why is she here every day, for goodness sake? But when her fiancé's parents came to see Mommy, because her fiancé dragged his parents to come and speak to my mommy, I was not surprised, but I learned a vital lesson. Mommy said, I would accept this young woman into your family with open arms, because she has wisdom like I have never seen before. Wow. Come on. To grow up with that, I was filled with admiration. I was listening in the corner, and I suddenly realized what this young woman had done for the man she wanted to marry. Most young girls these days, it's about the wedding dress. No. When you get married into a family. When you get married into that family, you unite the family so that your marriage will be blessed. You see, that young man did not fall off a tree. Neither did that young woman fall off a tree. She had a family, he had a family. When people get married, you unite your family. You don't divide and rule. If you divide and rule, you have no place in your partner's life. You've got absolutely no place there. Because what you're doing is you're wrecking or you're cursing instead of blessing. That's what I learned from that young woman, and I'll never forget it. Then at school, I learned, I was bullied. There's always, every school I go to, there's always one person who takes a dislike to me. That's what happens when you're bullied. You have nothing to do with them. You've never antagonized them. But this day, I was always given a lift by a next door neighbor. The school is about 12 miles away. And my mother had so many children, and she was quite grateful that this woman would give me a lift. But I was aware that this woman was resentful about giving me a lift to school. It was always uncomfortable, but it helped my mother, and so that was fine. We lived in a place called Ikeja. My school was in Yaba, which is a long way from Ikeja. Anyway, this day, this bully picked a fight. Child like me picked a fight with me. The whole class wanted this fight, and I just wasn't going to condescend to this market person behavior. I was sort of proud of who I was. Let me put it that way. Anyway, she threw a pair of scissors at me, which stuck in my back and drew blood. I went to the nurse, got treated. I came back to the class. We were punished, both of us, by the teacher, and we had to stay on a few minutes, tidy up the class after class. And I was panicked because I hoped this neighbor would have waited for me, because she taught in the school. When I came out of the class and the teacher said we could go, I picked up my bag and I ran. I was so relieved to see the car. And then I saw that she saw me. She told the driver to drive on, and they left me. I had no money. I had no food. I had to walk about 10 to 12 miles home. So anyway, I left school at 1:30 p.m. and I got home just around 8 p.m. But that day, the angels were with me. Don't know if you believe in angels. The angels were with me. They just taught me a whole life's lesson in those hours. And those lessons carry me to this day. one of those lessons, mob rule. You know, I learned on that day, being with a crowd is not a good thing. Nasty things happen with crowds. There was a mob, there was a noise. Everybody running to this place, and I was bored, trying to keep on the main road, looking out in case my mother came looking for me. But then I had to leave the main road because I was just curious. I was bored. I mean, I had been thrown out of one of those crowded buses because I didn't have any money. I just thought maybe I could cover a mile before they discover me. And it was so crowded. I'm telling you, those days in Nigeria, a bus that should take 15, they could get 25 people in there. And I had snuck in, but the bus conductor had seen my little face trying to hide and threw me out of the bus. Still bleeding, and the sun was very hot. Anyway, I left the road and went to see what this crowd was about, and I saw one of the most evil things I have seen in my life. They had set a young man on fire. For what? I had no idea. My view of the human race took a whole dive. It went straight into the pit, I can tell you that. And then, of course, years later, I learned about the lynching of young men. See, this evil is just as bad as lynching young black men in Southern America. And I realized that actually, humans, there's good and there's the bad. But my mother always said you have to look for the good and hang on to the good. And you have to be part of the good and not part of the bad. Another thing she always used to say is, whatever you do in life, as you get into your 40s, you begin to wear them like a cloak on your face. Gossiping, swearing, bad words, conniving, planning against someone, trying to bring someone down, jealousy, envy, all you wear on your face and on your body language, she said. And I saw this mob and I couldn't believe. I had to actually break through the crowd, just to see what was happening. Curiosity. Talk about curiosity kills a cat. Well, this stayed with me the rest of my life. What did he do to deserve that? I don't know. But no one could do anything so bad as to be burnt alive for maybe stealing or something, or even to be hung for just being the color they are. Even animals don't do that. That's something humans shouldn't do. But then I look at the crucifix and I know that's what we do. And so I learned one thing, always be on the side of good. Well, I'm going to stop there today because I am going to talk more about, you can get this story in my book, The Faith of a Child. There are some stories there, obviously some had been edited out, but I'll try and, get as many as possible on this so that you can let my life speak for me while you're watching this. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I thank all of you who have subscribed so far. May God bless you, and may you get lots of messages, and may your spirit be moved to learn wisdom, hopefully. Love you all. God bless. Mwah.